Been just over a week since the conference finals finished. I wanted to give a little time between when I made the video and kind of in between the week's action, the week's offs action, the Pro Bowl, etc. Partially because last week I was just crazy busy. I mean, this is not exactly my full-time job. Well, I don't really have a full-time job, so maybe it is. Doesn't matter, I was busy. But I wanted to see also how some of the stories started to evolve, and I think this week will be Super Bowl story heavy, but these are the stories I actually hate. These are the ones that they need more to the press crew needs a little bit more to talk about, and so they're kind of manufactured. I wanted to see how some of it kind of finished, and I wanted to give it a second thought. But anyway, similar to form in the past couple weeks, I'm going to go over the games that were. I'll talk about our pool, and then a few words before we get to the final here. So let's get it started. If you listened to the last video, you know I said that this was analytics versus gut call, and turns out old man gut worked on this one, although I don't know if that's exactly how it went down. If you were watching, it was actually super interesting to see some of the before game antics, the Justin Tucker innocently just trying to kick as an innocent kicker would, and then Mahomes asking him to leave a little bit and him not really doing it. So Kelsey coming over like the big brother and throwing his stuff away. Now, it does come out later. Tucker's like, I don't know what their problem was. And Mahomes kind of coming out and being like, this is what he does. I've never had a problem with any other kicker, but you know, Tucker's a wily vet. Just don't assume just because he's a tiny little kicker that he's always super innocent, right? Either way, the pregame antics didn't really amount to much, except for the fact that Kansas City came out with a chip on their shoulders. Andy Reid definitely had his plays scripted. All of their offense came early and looked quite great. Kelsey was obviously on the same page. I have been noticing that they cycle him out and give him a break after almost every play, but that didn't mean he couldn't pass Jerry Rice for total receptions in the postseason. And then the two combo there past Brady and Gronk in terms of number of touchdowns. So that's obviously pretty monumental. Not sure if that was part of the plan, was to get them to that pedestal or not. But then more surprisingly, Baltimore just really couldn't get it going, and Kansas City did a great job in limiting them. Second half, not exactly the most exciting. It was great in terms of there was always momentum and there was always things happening. And certainly the Zay Flowers fiasco of taunting penalty, fumble, and then smash my finger and cut it on the sidelines was entertaining unless you're a hardcore Ravens fan. But it really did give us an idea that maybe Baltimore's defense adjusted, the scripted plays kind of ran out, and Kansas City was actually really, really hesitant. A lot of screen passes, not a lot of chances taken. They really didn't let Mahomes be Mahomes in that one, but could have been the read. I mean, obviously, if you were watching it, you actually heard Hamilton, the linebacker from the Ravens, hit everybody on the field multiple times. Kind of interesting when him and Kelsey did the one-on-one, and Kelsey got the better of him a couple times. But obviously, Hamilton's showed why he's a Pro Bowler. But an interesting kind of situation where you wouldn't have thought that it was the Kansas City defense that tightened it up, and only 3 points scored in the second half. Not exactly what everyone thought was going to happen. Clock management obviously came into play. We saw a pass to themselves, and yes, I gave that for points because it counts. He actually threw and received 13 yards on that one in Lamar with that tip play. But it's funny because a play like that could have given a lot of momentum, which I'll talk about when I get to the next game, but didn't really seem to phase them that much. Kansas City just clearly had confidence, and eventually it kind of wore itself out. Baltimore just really never got anything going. Lamar Jackson, it's not going to help. You're going to hear it again next year. Can he be good in the playoffs? I don't really throw it all on his shoulders, but experience in this particular case certainly won out. In the second game, if you are up, I hope no one here is a hardcore 49ers or Lions fan, because if you are, you really hated one of those halves. As someone who kind of just likes watching chaos burn, and obviously my dogs had some vested interest in Detroit going through, the first half was obviously too good to be true. Everything was kind of coming up aces. Purdy looked like he couldn't get the offense going. They were limiting McCaffrey to an extent. And I'll talk about the defense kind of in the wrap up here. But then halftime hits, momentum changes slightly. And then again, talking about the analytics versus gut call, I'm not bashing numbers. I actually love them. As I said last week, I think that they're super helpful and help you get over some of your blind spots and your biases. But they don't measure momentum. And in fact, there's a lot of people in analytics that suggest that momentum doesn't exist. If you've ever watched more than a couple games of football and you didn't see that interception that Purdy should have thrown that bounces off a helmet and Aiyuk catches it, and you're like, uh-oh, things are about to change. You could just feel it, even as I was lying around trying to stay awake and watch it as late as I could. right then I'm like, oh, this isn't done. Something crazy is about to happen. And sure enough, Brock Purdy looked great in the second half. Had a couple of decent drives that really kept him in it. Now Detroit didn't just roll over and play dead. In fact, they didn't roll over at all. Some would have wished that they would. And certainly, if you pay attention to football, you have heard enough about fourth down conversions. Probably, I'm of two minds. Yeah, I would have taken the points probably too, and given the field goal, considering that your offense was sputtering and it wasn't exactly you were firing on all cylinders. But Detroit's been really clear. They go after it almost no matter what. So if they aren't that kind of team, maybe they don't get to this spot. Who knows? But either way, I feel like anything that if you turn to, if it's fourth and under 3, they always say go for it. It's worth it. So they did. It didn't work out. San Francisco's going to hold tight. Now, when I said things I wanted to talk about, I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of the fun stuff into the Super Bowl. But just looking ahead at this matchup, it's super interesting. If you would have watched only the first 2/3 of this season, you got the 49ers, who had looked like the best in the NFC since pretty much the start. And with only a couple blips when they had some rough matchups and they just didn't really, there was weeks that they didn't come out and they either weren't fully healthy or just didn't play well. Or there's a game, obviously, against Baltimore when Purdy looked horrendous. For the most part, they were the favorites, and they're supposed to be here. So that's not a massive surprise. Kind of hurts the Lions, and they definitely Lionsed themselves. Like they'd earned the Detroit mantle on that one. But realistically, the one thing that shocks me about this is it's an inverse of what happens here. Because in the AFC, the Chiefs were always, people were scared of them because it's Mahomes and it's the crew that they know. But they looked like maybe the fourth best team in the AFC at times. But they battled through some of the best offenses in the AFC. And I don't think it's a huge surprise that they're here. So we do have teams that were quite likely and have a little bit of a pedigree to it. But the thing that I think is interesting is if you would have told me one of the defenses has been dominant in the second half of the entire playoffs, I would have assumed the 49ers. Seems like everyone can score on the 49ers right now. The Packers certainly didn't have a problem. Now the Lions offense is pretty talented, but they did sputter in the second half, but that game was pretty high scoring. It's the Chiefs that have been killing. I mean, this is Miami. Granted, they had injuries. This is Buffalo. Granted, it's Buffalo. And then Baltimore. These are three of the best offensive teams in the AFC, and Kansas City just limited them. So if you would have said defensive battle is going to win the Super Bowl, I'm like, yeah, and then that's the 49ers. But now I'm not so sure. It's going to be a kind of a tough read on that one, and we'll have to kind of see how it plays out. I will get to that, but before I get to some of my last minute words on the Super Bowl itself, because you've heard you can get way more talented people than me to chime in on it, I do want to talk about our pool and what we're looking at going to our final week. This is the page that everyone can see, and I know a lot of you. Actually, it was funny. As I was updating the scores, I saw people signing in to take a look, so that was kind of exciting. I think you have a rough idea of what all of this means. Now, the only thing I will say is now that there's no advantage and no one can make any other choices, Shea has obviously pulled the trigger. He had Lamar Jackson. He has subbed it in for Mahomes, so now we will all have our subs. I'm just keeping with tradition, so maybe I just do this right now. Live, there we go. Now all our subs are done. The numbers that we have out, like I said, next year I'll fix that little bit. But to take a look just at the second part here, so this was just the conference finals and how people finished. Now, not surprisingly, look at V2. Part of the reason, he's the only one completely out of players. Now, the reason is he's also the only one that didn't have McCaffrey. So it's not just the players you have, it's the unique players you have. And I think that's going to be the interesting part because so many people invested in the 49ers that even if you have 3 or 4 49ers, only 1 or 2 might give you an advantage of the person in front of you. So part of the reason my dogs are ahead right now is they won the second round as well. I think that's 2 in a row. They won the divisional, even after a pretty mediocre, a 10th place. So coming back, getting 123, that's like almost 100 more than the last place. Now, a few people there were in the hundreds because they still had a lot of people going. Rushke obviously has a big 49er contingent. Corbin having a great week. I think that's your best one yet in terms of placement. And then my dad, that's part of the reason why he was able to maintain in the top spot or near the top spot here. So well done, everyone there. Now, what I've done on the stats, just to kind of give you an idea, yes, I do this a little bit too much. You don't need to worry about the percentages. What I did here was kind of right on the side, who's got quarterbacks left, and then who's got like a little acronym of players. I stopped here just because there was a lot of repeats. I don't know if you are 7, 8, or below, if you have a chance. So I kind of stopped making them. You can do your own kind of bit here by seeing who's where. Now, obviously, Shea does have 2 quarterbacks. When I say, now everyone has McCaffrey, that's Debo and that's Pacheco. So if he was interested in trying to pass me, obviously he needs Purdy and Debo. Everything that they do is a bonus, but I have Kittle and Travis Kelce, so everything they do. So you see how that kind of works. Now, how that's really going to influence our top spot. So the Dogs do not have their quarterbacks. Like I said, we could have gone conservative and taken Purdy, but we went Goff and we went risky, and that might bite us in the butt on this one. Let's see, because the people behind us definitely have quarterbacks. Both Mahomes and Purdy are represented. My dad with Mahomes, obviously. Jake's been riding Purdy there for a bit, so don't worry about the sirens. This actually happens quite a bit. So that could be an issue. Now, again, everyone having McCaffrey. Both my dogs and dad have Pacheco. They have Kelsey. They both have Debo. So realistically, for my dad to catch, he needs about 32 points to tie, 33 to win from Mahomes and George Kittle, which is possible. They both, if you take both of their high points they've gotten in the postseason, that would be more than 33. If you take their low, obviously, no bueno. In terms of Jake, he's going to have a harder time kind of catching my dad. He really needs Mahomes to not have a great game. He needs Pacheco to not have a great game. And he needs Kittle to not have a great game, because realistically the D and the T, they kind of wind out. So really for him, it's just Purdy. Can Purdy catch up with the 7 points he would need? Could be tougher. It really depends. But Purdy getting more points than Mahomes, possible, right? He could go on a massive run. Pacheco not having a great game. Like, there is possibilities. It's just a little bit less likely, but still very much in play. Now, Chainer, the one thing he's got is Ayuk, so that's the player he's really going to want to go off, and probably not just on passes, because that means Purdy, which he is sandwiched by, with Corbin having Purdy and Jake and Jim below him. So he's really going to want kind of handoffs, especially since the people below him have Ayuk. If Ayuk goes off and Purdy doesn't do it, there is the chance here between Pacheco, Ayuk. He could pass Jake and get in the money. Remember, top three does it. Corbin and Jim, I've done the math. It is technically possible. You would need some monster games and some really interesting scenarios to happen. A little bit less likely for Jim because he has less unique players. But Corbin's still in the mix. You would just need kind of a big run. So the good side is the poll's definitely not done. Who wins is going to come down to the last game. I don't know, though, for sure if there's going to be a lot of movement in the money rounds. I think it's pretty likely. Like, Kent can pass Ben. Now, Ben actually does have some players, just not the quarterback. But Kent has a fair bit still in it. He's got 6 players. I'm pretty much done. I think we can agree on that. Shea could make a big move. Horst could make a big move, having both quarterbacks if it's a very pass-heavy game. So I think the seedings and the standings will still go. Not Will. He's done. He has 0 left, and he's done. He will be our 15th person. But remember, there's another version of himself that could maybe make some trouble. Might be enough, might not. Let's see how it goes. In terms of just our positional, just because I'm spending some time on it, just in case you are the kind of person who wants to figure out what was the best use of your time, our top 2 quarterbacks are actually still Allen and Baker Mayfield. Lamar is actually still technically third, but Mahomes is 1 point behind him. So knock on wood, if he doesn't get hurt, he'll pass him likely and be third. He could continue to pass him with 3 points and be our second. And if he gets 14 or more, which he's gotten each game that he has played, he would be our number 1 most valuable. Now, Purdy's still in the mix, but he would have to have a monster performance, but he should be able to get himself at least into the top 5. In terms of our running backs, the CMC Music Factory has been number 1 each time he's gone out there, so we can expect maybe the same, but Pacheco has been solid third. Got to think he's probably at least going to be second on this one. Maybe he outpunches McCaffrey. Let's see. But he has been overall. He got the extra game of McCaffrey, but he's been our running back 2. Jones is still our running back 3, and then Gibbs and Monty combined for 4 and 5. I don't see anyone else off the bench. Now, Mitchell here is technically on our list, and I am keeping track of people that weren't there out of my own interest, really. And we'll see. Apparently, there's some health news that has gone on. So I think Kansas City might have a little bit of a wild card in the backfield that might be coming out. So we'll see how that works. For wide receivers, Kelsey now passed, and he is our most valuable receiver / tight end. He was the second highest last week for the second week in a row. Jameson Williams randomly got in there, and he actually jumped himself up with a monster game, which really shows more the fact that the wide receiver position and tight end position has not been super valuable. I mean, the top couple, yes, but I mean, St. Brown with 32, and then it drips to 29, and that's someone who only played 2 games. Rice, who had a very mediocre last 2 games, but 1 good game puts him in our top 5. And Jake Ferguson is actually technically tied for 4th, and that's with 1 game. So we've had a lot of receivers, and if you're curious about this, I mean, Kittle and Ayuk, quite low still. Debo is even lower, especially because of the injury. They're still kicking, but they didn't really do what they should. I keep going down. People like Diggs, obviously, probably the biggest disappointment because he got 2 games. He's not the worst receiver, but I stopped keeping track after him because I stopped, I thought it made sense. And then people like CeeDee Lamb only getting the one game and having 11. So if you are able to get a lot of points off your wide receivers, good for you. If you've been taking Debo and Ayuk because you're really, really hoping for this to be their monster game, I guess you might see, and maybe you'll get your points up. Anywho, that's kind of it for our pool. You can definitely take a look and do some of your own math because I may have mixed up some of mine. But just before I wrap up the video, let's go to some closing thoughts. Throwing in my last 2 cents is one of the things I took notes throughout the entire game, and I have funny things like, wow, Zay Flowers looks like a CGI character. Or actually, the comments about Lamar, it was, things are about to happen. He just threw to himself. Never mind, the Ravens be Ravens. And so apparently the glass of wine I had may have assisted my notes. But as I kind of kept going, and then I'd left a few from this past week, one of the things that, and I don't even know how much I really want to talk about this, but going out and trying to find other people and find other sources of what they think the Super Bowl is going to be like. Let's be honest, I like the Super Bowl because it's fun, right? And this whole league is all meant to just be kind of fun and games because it is just meant to be a game. The big promotional stuff, normally I'm not a big fan of for the Super Bowl. I don't really love the advertisements. I'm not the military flyover in the beginning, big kind of pomp and circumstance kind of guy. But it seems like I'm in the minority, and most other people feel the opposite way. But what I think is crazy is I'm trying to approach this with a more positive framework, and I cannot believe this year how many people seem to hate everything about football in this game. It's mainly focused around Kansas City and Swift and Kelsey, and I don't need to go into a lot of depth about that, but man, people just got to relax a little bit on this one. I for whatever reason, people seem very keen on if the Chiefs lose, it's all her fault for sitting in the stands, I guess. And if they win, it's a massive government conspiracy to control and indoctrinate the world. That's ambitious. I mean, she definitely is great at business. I just don't think she assumes she's going to take the world over through her libido. But what do I know? I've never met her. But it's not fun, right? I mean, so I've kind of made a vested interest myself, and I'll stop talking about this. Any person that goes on, and now granted, some of these are not people that I take super seriously all the time. If you've actually been in court and admitted that the things you do and say are a bit, and you don't believe in them, but then you go out and then you still say them, I probably haven't listened to you or followed you for a while. But any podcast, article, or kind of journalist or sports media personality that takes that seriously at all, like, you have to look at yourself in the face and say the words and think about how ridiculous that is. I'll be done with them, and I'm just moving on. So it's been nice. I'm narrowing down some of the people I've read because I just have no time for there's way more serious things than that. So what I want to focus on the end is the fun stuff. And obviously, if you're in this pool, sometimes you like to put a little bit of money on things or try and make things a little bit more interesting. So one of the best things about Super Bowl is the prop bets. And I have to say, this year I did look at some. Now, books are all different, but each place is going to have its own numbers, its own odds. There's a few kind of interesting ones, to be completely honest with you. One of the ones, I mean, I'm not a bet on the Gatorade color kind of guy because I think that's just too fluky. And actually, sometimes I'm just used to the Canadian feed and they don't always show it. So you have to look it up later and it's kind of tough to find. I would say, though, if you're that kind of person, shade your color off. I mean, just remember there is going to be a retired, shirtless, and probably intoxicated Jason Kelsey somewhere in the stadium. Would you there's at least a 4% chance he tries to pee in the Gatorade. So if you were going to bet on green, maybe bet on purple. There might be a slight deviation in color, but I wouldn't touch that. One of the more interesting ones, though, that you wouldn't think I'd be interested in. I was looking at how long the over-under on the time it takes to sing the national anthem. And unless I'm wrong here, it's supposed to be Reba McEntire, but the number is insane. I think the shortest one since they've been taking this number was like Kelly Clarkson or something with like 145 or, in that ballpark. Last year, I think it was Pink, and I think she was around the 2-minute mark, and she was like right on the over-under. She was within like a second. So that was really tense for people trying to figure out before or after the 2-minute line. But they got Reba in some books as a minute 26, which is a solid 20 seconds faster than the national anthem's been sung. They have to know something, right? They wouldn't set that number so low. You just bet over and everyone would win. So, like, is she doing it to a tempo here? Is there going to be like a country twang to this? And is this going to be like a hoppin' national anthem? Now I'm kind of somewhat excited to see. Aside from that, there's obviously a ton of bets you can make during the game. One of the better ones I like to think about is pick somebody that doesn't normally score. Like, yeah, you can say Mahomes for a touchdown. You're not going to get big odds there. Even Kelsey or to an extent McCaffrey. Like, these are all people that it's usually have to pay more than you get back. take a random person. There's always a flyer that scores, whether it's like a punt return, whether it's going to be one of the Chiefs receivers that normally drops the ball. Even last year, Tony almost had 2 touchdowns, definitely had one, and then the second one didn't quite work out. He is back in this game, which is probably an advantage for San Francisco, to be honest, the way he usually screws things up for them. But like MVS with a couple big catches, would he be someone you could get some decent cash on? Pick up maybe even the fullback slash backup. Was it Juszczyk, whose wife is making now all these like coats and things for people? He's in the news. Maybe throw a little there. That's always a decent one. MVPs, obviously you pick the quarterbacks, then you're not going to get great odds on that. But you can actually pick everyone but the MVP. And in any given year, if you think the Chiefs are going to win, it's likely going to be Mahomes, because that's just the way it works. But if San Francisco wins, it wouldn't shock me if it's because it's McCaffrey or a defensive play that busts in. So just bear that in mind as you're going in. But like I said, I think the biggest thing is you got to have fun with it. So if you are in a time zone that you can watch it, you can sit with some friends and throw some coin around. Hope you have an awesome time. For me, don't be shocked. It's going to be a little bit delayed on my reaction video here. Now, I'll update the scores, but it won't be the day after. Please don't also send me messages. I will not be reading them. I'm doing a media blackout. Decided with a group of friends here, we're getting together Monday morning, and we're all going to watch it blind, so we get to actually experience it here. If not, we were waking up at 2 or 3 in the morning, and that sounds awesome until it's the second half, and it's 4 in the morning, and it's tough. So, I will update by Monday night my time, which is about Monday afternoon if you're in North America, or it's Tuesday morning if you're in East Asia. So the updates will be there, but you already know kind of the rough breakdown. But either way, I hope everyone watches at least a little bit. Hope this has added a little bit more fun to the mix, and enjoy the Super Bowl, everybody.